Accusations, the 1st of May, 2025. When the world reaches the end, when there is an apocalypse where only a few people remain, then people would be less likely to desire to share thoughts and knowledge. People wouldn't be writing because there will be less of a chance for someone to read what they wrote. يعجز عقلي. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قالوا إنا سمعنا كتابا أنزل من بعد موسى يهدي للحق وإلى طريق مستقيم. English is compromised. You need to speak. Silence can be harmful. Jews would stay silent and would consider it a form of worship. The Torah defines silence as being the key to a positive and healthy relationship with God and oneself. Shavuot is the gateway to an existence above and beyond sound. In Judaism, they would take the commandment not to take the Lord's name in vain to a degree where they would fear writing God's name. They also would not remove God's name after writing it. Self-righteousness. The 2nd of May, 2025. If every time Jesus is called Son, the word is changed to Messenger of God instead, wouldn't that solve the whole problem between Christians and Muslims? What if they say, when asked about what they said in their earthly life, this is what we meant? Jesus will disown them for saying he is what he never said about himself. What if God chooses to forgive them? It is not within the rights of the Muslims to write them all off as blasphemers or disbelievers, when Muslims themselves cannot be forgiven for the atrocious things that they say or claim about God. At least some Christians would hold God in reverence. If a righteous ruler arises among the Muslims and is asked by Muslims to exact punishment on Jews and Christians, he should start by exacting punishment on Muslims, purging evil from among them, before turning towards Jews and Christians. Even if some things that Jews and Christians say are sinful and blasphemous, the earth itself had heard them say these things ever since the beginning. The earth would ask God's permission to destroy them. The earth does not have a political agenda for the things that it desires to do to them. It would be no different with those Muslims who, knowing the consequences of their actions, would blaspheme God. When someone sees a person that they know deep in their hearts that this person is going to hell, do they not sympathize with them? Should that person not be told about the sins that he commits which would cause him to enter hellfire? Even if someone is arrogant and would not accept to be told they are wrong, shouldn't people sympathize with him? At times, it would be difficult to sympathize with a person whom we know that God is angry with. If a person would cause God's wrath to befall a group of people, then that person cannot be sympathized with. It is only because humans are a single species that they would not desire a grievous punishment to befall one of their own. If people are too arrogant to listen and heed the advice, then they need to be rebuked. It is no wonder that God sends such devils to people to poke and pinch them around. If righteous people fail to knock some sense into them, then surely a devil would do the job if necessary. Some sinners would not listen to the sound of reason. If they do not get confronted with a sinner who resembles them and what they think or believe, they would not be moved to heed the advice. Imagine a devil giving advice to a human. The human would heed the advice of the devil if the human himself is bound to become a devil in the end. God calls them brothers when they are thrown in hellfire to share a bowl of lava together. Such a disaster. It is not our fault, some people would reply when they are asked why they did not feed the poor and hungry. Why did Arab leaders not intervene to help them? Even the Arab leaders would avoid the responsibility and would say, why did other leaders not help them? Or they would pretend like they had no hand in whatever had happened. It is the oppressive regimes, or it is the enemies who are doing it, or they closed the borders. We had nothing to do with it. It is not our fault, is an excuse to avoid the responsibility, which is set upon every person towards their brothers and other people who are suffering. That excuse will not help them. People who see another person hungry while they can feed them will be punished. The 28th of May, 2025. What's in it for me is not my attitude. There's no need for a process for wishes to be granted. He thinks he's better than other humans. An attitude that has to be eradicated. No person will enter paradise with an attitude of grandeur and pride, no matter how much they relentlessly worship. I seem to be leaning towards removing my traces. Once I realized that I might be held accountable for a deed or an action that I did, I tend to take action, or at least think of doing something to remove the thing I did. Removing traces of an action does not mean that the action was not done. The excuse I had professed is that my reason for removing the traces is because I fear being held accountable for the thing I had done. It is ironic. Why are you doing this? I don't know why I'm also hesitant. He chose blindness, or he chose spectating. Two entirely different concepts. If this is what I do, commenting and elaborating, then there is no wonder I would choose to remove traces I left, especially since I know I will have to render an account for each one of them. Additionally, it comes as no surprise that I would rather not speak about myself in first person. At least, that way, I wouldn't have to explain things to people about where I'm coming from, or why I said such a thing about myself at that specific instance. There should not be anything wrong with speaking to others in general terms, rather than in the first person. Even if that is a self-righteous claim, it is still valid. Who would feel superior at saying such a thing? If by overpowering one's own argument, they would feel a sense of superiority, then surely the original argument lacked something, and by adding another thing to the mix, the argument was made stronger. Yet, if by making one's argument stronger, one would feel superior despite not having anyone to argue with, then that surely only feeds into grandeur and pride. Should arguments not be made anymore? Should no point be raised about anything anymore? If each topic is dangerous, each sentence ensures a perfect sentence of death or punishment. And if every time an argument is raised, it only leads to more and more pride and grandeur, then what is the point of it all? If people are made to fear the mere notion of thinking on paper, then it renders all human endeavors pointless. Vanity of vanities. Everything is vanity. Self-righteousness. What if a thought in itself is not useful on its own to the person who thought it? What if a thought is meant to be written down because it is useless on its own? Since it happened and was given to the one who thought it, then it has some good in it. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been given in the first place. Nothing in this world ever results in evil on its own without some good being done alongside it. Evil cannot be the only result of any one action. There will be a good outcome of all actions and deeds committed. This is why they were allowed to happen. However, some good is not realized immediately, but humans could only perceive the bad outcome first, thinking that it is the only outcome there is of that action. There are things that I have already promised not to speak about. There are things that I have sworn not to attempt. Of those things, no one shall ever know, even if there were a huge chance that they would be good to others, no matter how angry you would get.